Stone walls, howling wind. A castle bedroom that feels more like a cave. So how did people in the Middle Ages sleep through winter without turning into ice? They didn't rely on one thing. It was a whole system. The room, the bed, the layers, the heat source, and where you slept. In relation to all of it, some tricks were simple, some a little gross, and one was so obvious, you'll wonder why we don't do it today. Want a clue? The warmest heater in the castle wasn't always the fireplace. We'll step inside a drafty tower room and show you how they stack the odds against the cold one smart choice at a time. Tell me the exact time you're watching Dawn Midnight or somewhere in between. If you want more history explained in clear, simple stories, tap likes, so this one reaches more people. Ice bites first. You step through the postern gate and the castle greets you with the kind of cold that doesn't shout. It seeps. It crawls under linen slides along your spine, then settles in your bones like a tenant who never pays rent. Stone looks noble from a distance, but up close, it is a battery for winter. The walls are thick, often 2 meters, which sounds safe until you realize stone pulls warmth out of you like a hand on ice. You feel the logic of security working against comfort. Arrow slits make windpipes. When windows exist, they're small. Sometimes oiled parchment or horn in earlier centuries, later little diamonds of glass in lead. Pretty. Yes. Airtight, numb. Big doors must welcome carts and authority, and every gap around a timbered leaf becomes a whistle. The castle is playing you like a flute. The floor is another accomplice. Flagstones hold yesterday's frost. Reeds or rushes may be strewn underfoot, sprinkled with herbs, meadow-sweet rosemary, sage to freshen smells and hush bootsteps. But that thin litter won't stop the cold climbing your calves. Your breath smokes when you laugh. In the great hall, you hear as much as you feel. The ceiling soars so smoke can rise and banners can impress, but height is a heat thief. Warmth rushes up to flirt with the rafters while you shiver at floor level. Have you stood under a glass atrium in January and felt your shoulders hunch without permission? The architecture advertises power more than it hugs humans. Servants teach you microgeography. Hug an interior wall and the draft is gentler. Lean on the outer one and your shoulder learns new vocabulary. Spiral stairs wind clockwise so right-handed defenders can fight, which is terrific for safety and terrible for toes. The well is a wind tunnel. Even clever features have temperature costs. The same openings that let sentries watch the courtyard also invite the north wind to sign your skin. You notice small rebellions. Benches stand a hand's breadth from the wall to create a sliver of air that keeps your back from kissing ice. Tapestries aren't just decoration. They are woolen insulation with a narrative. A hunt scene slows the draft that slides along stone the way a heavy curtain calms a city window. People cluster where 2 walls meet because corners collect eddies of leftover warmth. Every choice is micro-engineering against the climate of rock. Night sharpens everything. Day grants mercy in motion. Night asks you to be still, and stillness is the cold's favorite sport. The central hearth makes the hall survivable, but step into the passage to the gatehouse and the temperature drops as if someone opened a trap door. Stone exhales the day's chill back into your cheeks. If you've ever slept against a concrete wall in early spring with no insulation, you know the interview your skin is about to have with physics. The air has a flavor wood smoke, damp wool, a line of iron from a door ring, a hint of horse from the stable court, and sometimes a leafiness from fresh rushes. Thin ice films the threshold and cracks under a heel. You tuck your hands into your sleeves because bare skin on iron is a bad idea. You keep walking because warmth, like gossip, travels in clusters here. Hierarchy maps onto temperature. The solar, the Lord's private upper room, chases the sun on the best side of the castle, because every ray pays interest. Hangings break a big chamber into smaller pockets of survivable air. Lower in rank, closer to service spaces, not just social commentary physics. If you had to nap, you'd choose the wall shared with the kitchen over the one shared with the outer court. Someone gives you a rule of thumb. Cold travels like a spy, quiet patient using side doors. You start reading a candle like a compass. The flame leans to show a leak you can't see. You test latches with the back of your hand for the sigh of wind. In a stone world, sleep isn't a reward for finishing the day. It's a project that starts long before you yawn. If I dropped you into this hall right now, where would you put your bedding center by the fire's light? Or along the wall behind a tapestry? There's no perfect answer. Only trade-offs: smoke in hair or draft at the neck. Warmth for feet or quiet for ears. People made that choice nightly because tomorrow still needed bread and repairs. So you inventory what you can control. You learn the rhythm of doors and the personalities of winds. You start wearing a cap indoors because the fastest way to lose heat is from your head, and the second fastest is from pride. You come to value a snug threshold the way modern people value double glazing. A well-fitted door is not just carpentry, it is mercy with hinges. You aren't mastering anything yet, you're noticing. The castle is teaching you its climate stone that remembers last week's frost spaces that growl when weather turns corners that practice kindness in secret. Tonight your mission is modest map the cold. Tomorrow you'll begin turning that map into survival. For now, breathe slowly, tuck your hands and claim the least unfriendly corner you can find. Because here the night belongs first to the wind and only then to you. You graduate from mapping the cold to negotiating with fire. The arrangement is simple. You feed it, it feeds you, and nobody pretends the relationship is equal. In the Great Hall, the hearth occupies the social center, not because it's picturesque, but because it's the only thing here that behaves like a sun. Its rectangle of glowing coals is a daily stage. Cooks, stewards, guests, dogs. Everyone plots their orbit edging as close as manners allow, and as far as smoke demands. Getting this heat costs muscle. Wood doesn't stroll in by itself. You watch carters bring cords from managed woodland, coppiced, hazel, and ash, occasionally oak reserved for serious timber. Green wood sizzles and pouts. Seasoned wood burns with a calmer confidence. A porter sniffs a log and declares it's sulking too damp. He leans it by the hearthstones to finish drying because fuel is also furniture here. If you've ever tried roasting marshmallows over a fire that hisses like a cat, you already know why patience is a heat source. At the heart of the hall, iron dogs raise logs so air can feed the flames. A hammered fireback throws warmth forward instead of surrendering it to stone. A spit creaks with meat when there's a feast, but most nights, it's just porridge and smoke inscriptions in the rafters. The roof louvre above an adjustable opening exhales the worst of the fumes, though not all. Your eyes prickle. Your cloak drinks smoke the way bread drinks broth. If you're thinking, wouldn't a chimney fix this? You're early. Tall, well-drafted chimneys are a later medieval luxury. Earlier halls rely on canopies, hoods, and that roof gap to herd the smoke vaguely upward, while people live in the leftover air. Servants choreograph the blaze like a breathing creature. They bank the fire at dusk, raking a hill of embers and pulling a cover of ash across the top so the coals nap without dying insurance against the 3 a.m. shivers. You learn the old word curfew from the French couvre-feu. Cover the fire not because the town bell orders bed, but because the house must sleep without burning down. A brazier glows by the high table, a smaller sun for privileged shins. Another sits near the door where the draft bullies the first warm greeting out of every visitor. Portable heat is its own craft. You trail a chamberlain carrying a lidded brass chafing dish charcoal inside punctured top toward the Lord's solar. He sets it under the table to rescue feet from stone's arguments. In bedchambers, someone glides a bed warmer, a shallow pan of coals with a long handle between sheets keeping it moving so linen doesn't scorch, and someone doesn't have to learn fire safety the painful way. Have you warmed socks on a radiator and then worn them immediately? Smiling at your own cleverness? That's the emotion this tool summons. Except the room still keeps its breath held. Charcoal is prized where smoke would be a bully guard room's closets, the solar, because it burns hot and neater, though everyone knows you still crack a shutter. Nobody has a carbon monoxide detector. Only a century's worth of folk wisdom and the habit of living with doors that don't seal like jar lids. A brazier on the stair landing is both considerate and slightly risky. The rushes underfoot appreciate embers about as much as a cat appreciates a bath. A boy with a leather bucket and a stern expression owns the night. His job is to be faster than sparks. The kitchen is the castle's volcano. Its hearth yawns wide, sometimes big enough to walk into with cranes of iron that swing pots like planets. Here the ceiling blackens like a permanent eclipse. But two good things happen: food and heat that leaks through walls into neighboring rooms. Smart sleepers claim the chamber that shares a wall with the ovens. An unromantic position next to the larder beats poetry beside an outer parapet. On days when bread bakes, the whole end of the castle purrs. Upstairs you meet a technology with ambition, wall fireplaces with short flues that kiss the outer skin of the castle. Early versions remain smoky and sulky. Later, tall chimneys learn to draft, and suddenly individual rooms can have their own domesticated flames. That is an architectural mic drop. A hooded fireplace pushes warmth forward and sulks less into the room. A carved mantel isn't merely status. It's a shelf for heat, a place for drying gloves, a stage for a cup so the drink doesn't bite your teeth. Fuel economies breed etiquette. People rotate seats so nobody hogs the prime warmth for hours. A child is told to turn like a loaf, so both knees get a share. The old place, a stool for the gouty ankle, because concentrated heat soothes rebellious joints. Dogs audition as foot warmers and are rarely denied the role. If you've ever negotiated couch space near a space heater with family, you understand this parliament of limbs. Light doubles as heat, but at a cost to the nose. Rushlight's dried reeds dipped in tallow burn with a humble hiss and an aroma that suggests a candle grew up on a farm. Beeswax is sweeter, but dearer, saved for chapels or high ceremony. Torches belong to corridors, and minutes, not hours. They drip opinions. You find yourself grateful for a single good candle acting above its pay grade beside a brazier turning a corner of the room into a human habitat. What about the guards on the wall walk? They inherit wind and pay in fingers. A small brazier lives near the leeward side of a turret, tucked against stone with a shield as windbreak. Fingers learn the dance hover, pull back, clap, tuck into armpits. Helmets hold the day's cold like bowls. When you relieve a sentry for a cup of hot spiced ale near the kitchen door, you become the most popular person in a 10-yard radius. Fire safety isn't a committee. It's religion. Sparks leap toward rush matting and tapestries as if auditioning for a disaster. So the steward enforces tidiness, fresh rushes, damp edges around the hearth lids, for braziers when carried screens, to stop dogs from becoming experimental cooks. A small handbell hangs near the door. Everyone knows what it means if it rings after midnight, and it's not for prayer. Wood runs out faster than romance. Winters can turn the yard into a puzzle of dwindling stacks and anxious math. You learn the virtues of peat, where it's cut the thrift of twig bundles, the value of a coppiced copse that returns like a haircut. The fire doesn't care about your timetable, it cares about your piles and whether you thought about February back when apples were burping in the cider press. None of this makes rooms tropical. It makes edges kinder. You measure success in inches, the inch of ankle that stops aching, the inch of air beside the hearth where your breath no longer smokes. If I handed you the fire rake right now, would you bank the coals high or spread them wide? Would you favor steady, low heat or a burst to dry, damp cloaks? There isn't a right answer, only a night to get through, and wood that never gathers itself. You return the rake and sit, not because the fire makes you lazy, but because the choir of pops and sighs is the first voice here that doesn't ask you to be brave. You discover the castle's true central heating is portable and stitched. Fire warms rooms, clothes warm people. The rule is simple and smug: start with dry skin. Add smart layers, trap the warm air you make, and don't let the wind borrow it. Linen kisses the skin first, not because it's warmer than wool, but because it wicks sweat like a polite friend who changes the subject. A long linen shift or chemise reaches mid-calf, smooth and cool. And you realize comfort begins hours before bed, when you choose what touches you all day. Over linen comes wool, and wool is the hero who never brags. Even a thin worsted tunic holds tiny pockets of air. The thicker stuffed broadcloth frieze builds a weatherproof mood without feeling like armor. You learn the lanolin truth wool stays helpful even when damp, which in a stone maze where air and moisture make small packs is not a maybe, but a definitely. If modern folks swear by base layer, mid-layer shell, the medieval version is linen wool and whatever fur you can afford without being arrested by the steward. Your legs become a dissertation. Hose cling from thigh to toe, sometimes tied at the waist, sometimes pointed to your doublet. On frosty nights, you double them fine, inside heavier, outside sun. Feet get their own saga: soft shoes for corridors felt, or fur-lined slippers for bedchambers. Pattens for wet courtyards, if you must go out, though you try not to. You powder your feet with a pinch of rosemary and sage from the rush basket because dry skin is warm skin. This is less witchcraft than common sense in a house where evaporation lurks in every draft. Hands negotiate with the air via mitts or fingerless gloves, the kind you could still wear at a winter market today without earning a second glance. And then comes the head. The nightcap is not a joke. It's a thermal lid. You try a linen coif under a wool cap, and suddenly your shoulders drop, as if your body gets the memo that it is allowed to keep its heat. Hair traps warmth, but hair also loves smoke, so the cap also keeps tomorrow's pillow from smelling like a chimney sweep's memoir. When the hour turns sleepy, you don't undress like a modern minimalist. You edit. You loosen belts so blood isn't bossed around, trade mud-kissed outer layers. For a clean wool bedgown, keep the coif, and sometimes add a sleeveless surcoat that acts like a hug. In harsher winters, you meet the noble privilege of fur squirrel vair marten sable's thrifty cousin lambskin. It lines cloaks, edges collars, and peeks from cuffs. Fur is a microclimate with opinions, and the opinion is stay. Even tradesmen might have shearling or rabbit for sleeves. You respect every creature that lends you its insulation without turning the moment into a trophy show. Bed textiles become partners rather than props. Linen sheets feel cool at first, then go neutral, a good sign they're spreading your warmth neatly. Wool blankets are the main event, heavy, slightly scratchy honest. A thick coverlet or bed rug sits on top like a satisfied cat flattening drafts. In better rooms, a feather bed or down mattress stuffed ticks laid over rope laces cocoons your hips. You can almost hear the mattress cords singing as they take your weight, but you promise yourself to talk about beds later because tonight is about what you wear into them, not the furniture itself. Moisture management is quiet heroism. You never crawl into bed wearing day-damp hose because trapped clamminess turns to night cold the way a joke turns to an apology. A servant warms bricks in the kitchen and wraps them in cloth footstones that preheat your side of the world. A bed warmer kissed the sheets in the last section, but the trick now is retention. You tuck the lower sheet tightly, press the blanket edges under your body to seal the microclimate, then keep your cap on so the top of your personal chimney doesn't leak. Laundry rules shape comfort. Linen can be boiled and beaten clean. Wool prefers kindness. So you change linen as budget allows and air wool at windows when the sun deigns to visit. You beat cloaks on a rail in the courtyard, a drum roll against drafts and dust. Fleas exist, yes, but you handle them with ash combing lavender. And the truth that cleanliness in layers is not just social virtue, it is engineering. A clean layer holds air more politely than a greasy one, and ordinary warmth is often a negotiation with oils and fibers. Night rituals become choreography. You fold tomorrow's hose at the foot of the bed near a brick so morning doesn't ambush you. You slip a soft cap over ears and tie the coif laces loosely under the chin, enough to stay not enough to nag. You keep a small cloth for condensation around the window frame, because when warm breath meets cold stone, someone has to referee. Do you ever put tomorrow's clothes on the radiator so getting dressed is a reward? That instinct has been alive as long as stone has been cold. Status filters through fiber. A countess reaches for vair-lined bedgowns and silk borders not only for beauty, but because silk weaves windproof surprisingly well. A reeve sleeps in stout wool and thanks the sheep by name. Monks, in their regulated simplicity, still learn the same rules dry under warm, overhead-covered hands. Containen, you could walk into a Cistercian guest house with your modern merino base layer, and the porter would nod at the logic, even if he frowned at the color. Sumptuary laws occasionally wag fingers about who may flaunt which furs, but enforcement is more ink than chase. Warmth is an egalitarian lobbyist. When the wind tests the shutters, the only scandal is negligence. And when you see a guard tuck a spare woolen hood inside his cloak to make a double collar, you borrow the idea immediately, because the neck is a river of heat, and every river deserves a dam. Do you prefer one heavy layer or several lighter ones? Tonight teaches you choose the choir, not the soloist. Multiple layers trap multiple strata of air, each a modest defender that doesn't collapse when one seam misbehaves. If a sleeve cuffs too tight and slows blood, you loosen it. If a collar gapes, you cross a scarf and pin it with a simple brooch. The medieval version of a technical neck gaiter minus the logo. The last lesson arrives when a draft fingers your ankle and you feel nothing. Not because the world warmed, but because you built a private weather system under your blanket and invited your clothes to become part of it. Fire is loud. Stone is stubborn, but fabric listens. You turn your head on the pillow. Hear the hall's embers breathe their last soft pops, and trust the layers to keep working while you sleep. The way faithful tools do when nobody's watching. Draw the curtains, and you build a weather. You reach for the bed, not like furniture, but like fortification. A medieval bed is a climate plan. On legs posts or wall hooks, carry a tester that needs a canopy roof, thick curtains fall like battlements, and suddenly, the icy echoing room shrinks to a private pocket you can actually warm. All the firecraft from the hall and the layering from your clothes only become truly smug when you trap their work inside fabric walls. You don't get central heating. You get a small mobile climate treaty that happens to be nap-shaped. Start with the skeleton. Many beds sit on stout frames laced with ropes interwoven like a ship's net over the sea of stone. A servant uses a wooden bed key to tighten those ropes until the lattice goes from belly to drum. Whether or not the phrase "sleep tight" was born here, the physics is plain tight ropes mean fewer sags, fewer cold hollows, and less midnight, sliding toward the center when gravity tries to make new friends. On that lattice live the tick's sturdy fabric sacks stuffed with straw chaff wool. Or if you're fortunate, feathers and down. Straw needs refreshing as it crushes and crackles through the season. You learn to love the crisp sound that means tonight's support is new. A featherbed is not a cartoon cloud. It's a deep, yielding loaf that holds the warmth you bring to it, then returns it like a polite echo. Over the tick goes a linen sheet, cool at first, then calmer, and then blankets, coverlets, maybe a bed rug, heavy enough to negotiate with drafts. A patterned counterpane protects the nice stuff from smoke-dusted air when the curtains are open. When they're shut, your breath softens the chill into something human. The canopy isn't there because people are theatrical, though they absolutely are. It's there because warm air rises and curtains trap it. Think of your bed as a tent pitched indoors, a microclimate with rules. Draft snakes that skitter along the floor hit the curtain wall and lose their appetite. Soot and dust that fall from rafters meet the tester first, not your face. If you've ever hidden under a blanket and felt the air turn warmer, within seconds scale up that experiment, and you've got the bedchamber's favorite trick. Now, entry tactics. You don't fling yourself into a curtained bed like a festival. You stage an approach. Bed steps help you climb because mattresses are tall and dignity is slippery. A servant has already run a bed warmer between the sheets, sweeping it slowly. So there's warmth without scorch, then aired the curtains to let mischievous smoke thread out. You lay your nightcap, straight slide between linen layers, and pull the curtain on the wind with one hand, while the other tucks the lower edge snug to your shoulder. Do you prefer a small gap for fresh air or a full seal for maximum cozy? Tonight you experiment candle stub parked safely on a wall sconce behind a screen, because wax does not negotiate with linen. Privacy is real currency. In crowded castles, sleep is social, and yet the bed lets you curate your own night. Those curtains are not just warmth, they're boundaries. You can host a whispered conversation, share a prayer, or simply be off stage for a few hours in a house that never truly empties. Inventories from noble houses list entire sets. Tester valances side curtains, foot curtains, like a wardrobe for a stage, because warmth and privacy dress together. Common rooms below stairs copy the idea with humbler means, a hanging rug, a spare cloak on a pole. Anything to make an air pocket and a moment that belongs to you. Bed politics blend with rank. In a solar, the lord and lady's great bed sits under carved posts, the fabrics a parade of status and insulation. Wool-embroidered silk-lined fur, edged where cheek meets cold. In a guardroom pallet, beds and trundles slide out at night, like drawers of warmth straw refreshed from the stable loft, and stuffed into ticks that remember last week's laughter. A child's cradle might be slung near the fire, its hood a miniature tester rocking with a foot against a cord as easily at midnight as at noon. Monastic cells, colder, simpler, still value the curtain when rule allows. Even austerity appreciates sleep that doesn't involve teeth chattering. Vermin exist, and the bed fights them like a seasoned sergeant. Clean linen is a weapon. So are herb sachets, lavender wormwood mint, tucked into seams or tied to the bed rope. Curtains get beaten in the yard, ticks turned and restuffed, sheets boiled in lye. You keep your coif on not only for heat, but to deprive any tiny opportunists of a parade ground. Is this glamorous? Not particularly. Is it effective enough that you notice the difference on nights when housekeeping was zealous versus nights when the rush of a feast stole everyone's hours? Tools accumulate at arm's length. A small chest serves as nightstand, tinderbox, flint, a mug to keep water from tasting like the room a spoon of honey for the scratchy throat that smoke writes into some mornings. The chamber pot waits discreetly behind a screen because narrow spiral stairs at 3 a.m. are a trust exercise you decline. Your shoes point outward, ready for a quick slip-on, and a spare cloak hangs near the footpost for that moment when someone knocks with the words gate and problem in the same sentence. You pay attention to placement. Beds crave interior walls, especially those that share a back with the kitchen or bakehouse. Stone warmed by ovens becomes a silent companion that never complains. Beds bristling against outer walls collect dew in winter, where breath meets frost, their curtains turned into damp flags by morning. If stuck with cold walls, you interpose a tapestry and set the frame a hand's breadth away, letting a cushion of air act as an invisible quilt. Small gaps can do astonishing work sometimes. The most generous warmth is the space you leave between two stubborn surfaces. Etiquette steals the spotlight in a house full of sleepers. You knock on fabric, not wood, before you tug a curtain. You announce your name if you're the servant with the warming pan. You shake the bed steps to make sure they won't betray your ankles in the dark. You ask quietly if the other person likes the foot curtain closed, because feet are their own weather systems. People who have wintered together develop a choreography whose side claims the candle stub, who pulls first when the wind tests the seam. Do queens and counts sleep better? Warmer, yes. Better not always. More fabric muffles drafts, but power breeds visitors, prayer worry, and the kind of responsibility that wakes you before matins. Still, the bed as fortress is a democrat. Any space that can hold posts and curtains can hold warmth from a lady's chamber to a porter's nook. The principle never changes. Build a small world the wind can't govern, and ask your blankets to rule kindly while the winter argues with the walls. You learn the warmest rooms aren't always the prettiest. Down the service stairs, where boots thud and kettles mutter heat, live zine crowds, chores, and creatures that breathe. Nobles get curtains and carvings. Servants get company and straw. Yet on a winter night, company and straw do suspiciously well. The hall after a feast becomes a campground. Benches shove aside, trestles tilt up like shields, and pallets bloom across the floor in a pattern only regulars understand. Each pallet is a palliasse, a tick stuffed with straw, chaff, or reeds, stitched stout so stems don't poke through like impatient fingers. Fresh stuffing crackles a little when you lie down, the sound of thousands of hollow tubes agreeing to hold your warmth. Old stuffing goes flat and sly. Tonight's is new enough to feel springy under your shoulder blades. You help the understeward flip a heap of straw with a fork. He grins and explains the rotation, turn it off and change it, when it stops smelling like a field. Meadowsweet and mint get crumbled into the filling, because sleep prefers a whiff of summer to a hint of stable. Sheets. If there are sheets, they're linen and precious. Most nights you spread a blanket or two and call it wisdom. Pillows might be rolled cloaks. You discover the trick of tucking the blanket edge beneath your body to seal the leaky spots. Architecture can't hug you, but cloth can if you show it where. People pair up without ceremony. A groom drops beside a farrier because hoof talk starts early. Two kitchen lads claim the warm strip near the screen that hides the passage to the scullery. A laundress chooses the wall that shares heat with the bakehouse because ovens gossip warmth through stone long after midnight. A dog patrols, finds your feet, decides you are now related. Body heat is not romantic here. It's math. Two sleepers make twice the warmth with far less than twice the fuel. Would you trade a private icicle of a cot for a crowded quilt that actually works? On nights like this, most people do. Up in the guardroom, the choreography looks different, but believes the same physics. A brazier lives near the lee of the slit window. A cloak blocks the fretful draft, where the door never truly meets the jamb. Soldiers sleep in shifts, boots close at hand, spears stacked safely out of stumble range. When your watch ends, you don't wander for a lonely blanket. You slide onto the warm half of a pallet, just vacated by another human, exactly your temperature. There's nothing new under the winter moon. Modern campers call it stealing the heat footprint. Castle life just calls it common sense. Some nights send you to the loft above the stables. You climb a ladder, and the first breath tells you why this place is coveted. The horses below are furnaces that eat hay and exhale comfort. The hayloft is dry, springy, and lightly perfumed with the day's work. You carve a hollow in the hay, lay a cloak, and every rib thanks you. Is it glamorous? Not remotely. Is it warm, like a secret you can lean on? You fall asleep to the soft rip and grind of content animals and the occasional hoof knock that communicates more reassurance than any lullaby. The kitchen annexes are their own climate zone. By the scullery drain, warm water makes its own weather. And the air is so mild you forgive its opinions about onions. Scullions roll out palliasses near the copper, where heat lingers like a generous aunt. The spit boy claims a spot by the ash pit, because ashes hold coals the way memory holds news. Even here rules persist. Braziers, screened embers, banked, buckets filled. No one wants a lively night for the wrong reason. Shared warmth breeds etiquette. Snorers get the edge where a strategic elbow can be delivered with plausible deniability. Cloaks serve as social contracts. Your cloak covers both of us. My hood covers both of our heads. You turn like a loaf, so each side of you gets equal time near the warm spot. If someone staggers in late from the gatehouse, you shuffle without grudge. Bodies are bricks in this kind of masonry, and every brick matters. A question for you: do you prefer your feet at the fire and your head in cool air, or your head warm and your feet bargaining with the cold? Pick one. Nobody gets everything. Cleanliness is more than courtesy. It's performance. Lice combs live in the chest with the spare linens. Straw gets beaten and aired so the little stowaways don't turn your bed into a debate team. A barrel of lye and a copper for boiling linen fight the good fight on laundry day. Wool blankets go to the line for wind and sun. Is it perfect? Of course not. Is it noticeably better than neglect? Every skin can testify. Food helps. A posset hot milk with a ribbon of ale and a pinch of spice slides heat from throat to stomach, which is just a fancy way of saying you warm up from the inside. The night watch favors small wooden mugs of something hot and honest. You learn to eat your last bite standing near the kitchen door. Heat sneaks into cloak and hood and stays there like a polite guest. A warmed stone wrapped in cloth migrates from hearth to pallet, a quiet sun for your toes. Rank shuffles even in straw. The senior maid gets the gossipy warm place near the oven wall. New hands end up by the door, learning the draft's first name. The steward has a small truckle bed that slides beneath a larger frame. He enjoys both the heat of the hall and the speed of a quick exit when trouble knocks. In a corner, a mother nests with a newborn behind a makeshift curtain of cloaks. Privacy is a blanket you build with friends. Paranoia has a bedroll too. A captain sleeps with one arm through his belt so he doesn't abandon it in dreams. A porter props a stick against the door so its fall will wake him if someone lifts the latch. It's security theater that actually works, because here noise is a messenger and you want your messengers prompt. You keep your shoes pointing outward by habit. No one wants to waste seconds flipping them in the wrong direction. The best warmth is creative. Someone rigged a line above the brazier to dry hose. Someone else set a flat roof tile near the fire to turn in place as a crude heat tray for tomorrow's bread. A cloak folded twice becomes a shaped pillow that saves your neck an argument. You spot the inch-from-the-wall trick again this time, with pallets. Warmth loves a tiny air cushion more than it loves bravado. None of this looks like luxury. All of it feels like survival done with a wink. When the room finally stills, you hear the shared soundtrack of a castle asleep on purpose. A lowing from the court, a floorboard sigh, the brazier's soft breath, the close, steady chorus of human lungs pooling their heat into one space. You tuck the blanket edge under your hip and let the math of bodies do what stone won't. The night doesn't get easier. You get better at borrowing each other's weather until morning decides it's your turn to make breakfast. At some point, the night taps your shoulder. Not rudely, just that gentle nudge that says, "Wake for a bit." Your eyes open into fabric dark, the curtains a soft wall between your breath and the larger cold. This isn't insomnia. It's a perfectly ordinary pause. People expect it. The first sleep runs its course, then a watchful interlude arrives. The hour between before the second sleep gathers you again. If you've ever woken at 2 a.m., perfectly alert for no good reason, congratulations, your body still speaks a language the castle understands. A small ritual begins. You reach for the horn lantern, its panels made of thin, translucent horn that turns candlelight into a buttery, steady glow. The tinderbox answers with flint and steel, 2 sparks, a shy thread of char cloth, a breath, then a flame that looks older than the building. The lantern's lid clicks, the light goes polite, and you discover how a sphere of illumination shrinks a room until you can own it with one hand. The air beyond the curtains is colder. A quick lesson in microclimates. You open a gap, and the night kindly reintroduces itself to your skin. A bed warmer kisses your ankle with yesterday's memory. The coals have died, but the metal is still cool and convincing. You slide your feet into slippers and find the chamber pot behind its screen. There are guardrobes in the wall stone chutes that empty into the dark, but those seats are wind instruments at this hour, and you are not in the mood to play. The pot is sensible and close. The lid makes its soft wooden answer and preserves both temperature and dignity. From somewhere below, you catch the low clink of an iron, perhaps the watch turning a key, then the small hush of a door resettling in its frame. A castle never fully sleeps. It only changes shifts. The night porter walks his quiet route with a handbell he hopes not to ring. Up in the turret, a sentry stamps and breathes into cupped hands. Down by the kitchen, Ash settles with a sigh. Have you ever stood in a house at 3 a.m. and felt that the refrigerator hum, the ticking clock, the far traffic were all part of one patient animal? This is the medieval version, minus the refrigerator, and plus a draft that knows your name. On a stool, a candle marked with little tallow pegs holds time badly, but bravely when a peg drops. Another portion of the hour has slid by. Nearby sits a sand glass, the kind that doesn't mind being wrong by a handsome margin. For the most part, time belongs to cock's bells and habit. If the chapel keeps the hours somewhere, a monk is already pulling on his habit for matins. You picture a cold choir and a ribbon of song floating like breath in winter light. The human night divides itself into work and prayer, and this wise pause where you can think without a day leaning on you. Rodents audition for mischief. A soft scuttle in the wainscot and a whisk of shadow near the grain chest. Cats have the night shift too. You hear the small smug thud of one landing after a successful negotiation. Traps, simple tilting boards, or dangling nooses wait with a patience only string can achieve. The herb bundles tied to rafters aren't just for scent. Pennyroyal and mint perform their quiet diplomacy with pests. If a crumb crackles under your slipper, it's from last evening's bread. You pinch it, pocket it, and make a note to sweep in the morning. Because crumbs are currency in rodent economies. On the chest lies a folded cloak and a book of hours. Its pages a small galaxy of painted blues and gold leaf. You open it to a familiar prayer, lips moving in a whisper that doesn't jostle anyone else's dreams. The text has comfort, not because you can't sleep, sleep will return, but because this pocket of wakefulness is yours. People use it for many things: mending a torn cuff, mulling a problem, sharing a low conversation, warming a little ale with honey to settle a cough. Which would you choose tonight? Words work or a cup that sneaks the hearth into your chest? Elsewhere, someone makes the cautious trip to the embers. The fire was banked at curfew, a hill of coals, tucked under ash like a sleeping animal. With a long iron, you tease out a glow, feed it a sliver of split wood as thin as a promise, and coax a flame that neither boasts nor dies. A brazier near the door receives a few coals, then the lid perforated, so heat can speak, but sparks cannot returns with a soft metal kiss. The rule at night is modest heat, quiet light, and no heroics. Dreams and omens enjoy this period. You wake from a tapestry-colored dream sewn with faces you know, and a few you don't, and let it fade into the linen. People tell stories that hover between folklore and medicine. A sprig of valerian under the pillow. A whispered charm learned from a grandmother. A belief that the stomach sleeps better if it ends the day warmed. 2 sleeps turns out to be merciful, one for fatigue, one for looking gently at the life you're carrying. You glance at the candle again. You are not late for anything. The night is a wide hallway, and you are allowed to stroll. Practicalities return with small lists. Tomorrow, the straw in one pallet needs changing. It sounded tired when you lay down. The new pair of hose wants a stitch at the knee. The corner near the window needs a tighter shutter peg. The kitchen porter mentioned the bakehouse wall keeps heat like a friend. You'll aim your bedding nearer that warmth when chores allow. This is planning done at a whisper, the kind of thinking that likes the company of darkness more than the audience of daylight. A delicate cold noses under the curtain and finds your wrist. You answer by closing the gap a handspan and tucking the blanket edge so it understands you're in charge. The lantern settles on the chest light, drowsing against horn. The castle's noises space themselves out. A beam eases a dog's paw, thumps twice in sleep, water ticks, somewhere in a pipe that is only a hole with confidence. You slide back beneath linen and wool and build the small seal that turns your breath into weather again. Before sleep returns, you ask yourself one of those friendly questions that make the night feel like a confidant. If you owned one more comfort for this hour, would it be an extra blanket, a better candle, or a closer friend? There isn't a wrong answer here, only a choice about which kind of warmth you prefer, cloth, light, or company. You lay the thought down beside you, the way you'd lay down a glove, and it waits there, harmless, ready for morning. Your hands warm, your breath slows. The mind's little light dims without ceremony. The world outside the curtains resumes its patient patrol. And inside your small weather, you turn once and hear the faintest creak of rope, tight enough, warm enough, night enough, and let the second sleep come take the rest of you. Power sleeps loudly, even when it whispers. You notice it first in who gets to breathe the warmest air and who guards the door where that air lives. The royal bedchamber is a stage set for authority-deep mattress carved posts, curtains like a private banner, and beyond those curtains, layers of people who exist to make sure the sleeper wakes up alive and in a good mood. You slip through that outer room at a respectful shuffle, boots, soft eyes down, and feel the temperature rise with the rank. A chamberlain decides who may cross the threshold. Valets of the chamber lay out night clothes, check the brazier, and pretend not to hear the human noises that come with being important and tired. Kings don't sleep alone so much as sleep witnessed. A bodyguard or two sometimes more dozes on truckle beds near the door, the kind that slide under a larger frame by day and sail out at night like small boats. Keys hang close to the pillow. Bolts slide with a practiced clunk. A dog with better instincts than any lock curls by the bed steps and claims a salary in scratches. If you've ever nodded off on a red-eye flight with one hand on your bag, you understand this kind of rest, never fully surrendered, always one sound away from decisions. Paranoia isn't vanity. It's policy. A traveling court lives in borrowed rooms, castles you trust because your seal says mine, and because you've put your men in the stair and the hall. Henry II was famous for moving constantly. A restless king sleeps in other people's beds a lot, so the outer chamber becomes the real fortress. Edward I on campaign stacked sentries like stones. The bed was warm, but the watch was warmer. Louis XIX. Later, St. Louis took the opposite route and made austerity into a kind of armor, choosing simpler bedding and quiet habits that said, I don't owe the night a performance. Different styles, same subtext, care is the coverlet. Rank expresses itself in what touches skin. A queen draws silk-lined bedgowns and fur-edged covers as much for windproofing as for beauty. A prince's cradle has its own little tester, a tiny weather of privilege. Courtiers take notes. Warmth is a language, and everyone is fluent. Even so, etiquette binds luxury, a rule that candles be snuffed or screened, that braziers be lidded, that a page with a jug of water stays within whispering distance. The best nights are the ones without story. The absence of drama is a triumph no bard will sing about, but every steward quietly worships. Knights sleep with their ambitions parked within arm's reach. In a castle hall during winter, a knight might claim a raised dais corner or a chamber near the armory. His sword tucked close, scabbard looped over a bedpost like a promise. On campaign, he trusts canvas and companions. A tent, a cloak, a padded gambeson boots, loosened, but not exiled. There's a game of balances, rest versus readiness. You won't lie down in full mail unless you want tomorrow's back to stage a rebellion. But you will keep your belt to hand, and your knife, where your palm can find it in the dark. Do you fall asleep faster when the important thing you own is touching you? Most people do, whether it's a phone or a blade. Hierarchy tricks out the space around you. A squire often sleeps on a truckle, beneath his lord's bed, rolling himself away at dawn, like a secret. He learns to rise silently, to pull boots close and wake a brazier without making smoke act like a rebel. His warmth is borrowed from the floor, from the coals, from the rank he serves, and in return, he pays with attention. You've seen that exchange before: interns near the power outlet, apprentices near the kiln. Monastic life takes the crown for choreographed sleep. In the dorter, the long communal dormitory, a line of pallets or straw ticks stretches under a timbered roof. Silence is a law. Snoring, alas, is not illegal. The rule expects monks to sleep clothed so they can rise for the night office, quickly, belts ready, mind sober. The night stair stone steps spilling directly into the church lets a community move from bed to prayer without courting weather or gossip. Cistercians favor simplicity here, plain bedding, little heat, much discipline. Yet even austerity has its mercies, a permanent lamp near the door. A brother infirmerer who checks on the frail, a thick cloak granted by the abbot when winter cuts too sharp. If you've ever woken for a 5 a.m. shift and found comfort in routine more than in blankets, that's the monastery's logic running in your veins. Listen closely, and you can hear rank in the dark. The soft clink of a key on a lord's chest. The measured tread of a watchman outside a royal door. The rustle of a silk coverlet that costs a flock of sheep in coin and favors. The honest creak of a straw palliace in the servant's loft, each sound an entry in the ledger of who sleeps how. Power echoes. So does poverty. But survival techniques migrate both ways. A countess might borrow the guardroom trick of warming stones by the hearth. A groom might borrow the noble trick of hanging a spare cloak to make a windbreak. Good ideas ignore passports. You try on each identity for a minute to feel its temperature. As a monarch, you taste the uneasy sweetness of guarded warmth. As a knight, you weigh the comfort of readiness against the comfort of actual comfort. As a monk, you discover the strange heat that discipline lends to thin blankets. Which bed would you choose for one winter? The guarded velvet, the ready cloak, or the regulated straw pick costs first, benefits follow. Architecture bends to rank, but bows to physics. A lord's chamber stacks rooms like armor guardrobe, tucked in a wall-thick niche that can draft closet for linens, that holds the smell of lavender antechamber, where 3 men and a brazier make a soft, reliable weather. A monk's dormitory leans en masse over the chapter house for a hint of warmth under a heavy roof that snores with the wind. A knight's corner borrows the kitchen wall because bread keeps better company than banners when the moon is white. The logic is simple. You sleep where stone cooperates, and people you trust can stand between you and whatever the night thinks is clever. Even dreams file themselves by rank. A king wakes early with budgets and borders humming behind his eyes. A knight twitches at the memory of hooves in fog. A monk breathes the last psalm into his pillow and lets the syllables settle like snow. But whatever the dream's morning tests, all these beds the same way with cold fingers. That's the one democratic detail the knight never negotiates. The first step out of covers explains why everyone from crown to cow keeps a cloak within 1 arm's stretch and a plan within 2. If power sleeps loudly, wisdom sleeps prepared. You pat the place where your key would hang, where your belt would lie, where your habit's hood would wait for the bell. You aren't a king or a knight or professed in a monastery. Tonight you are simply a person borrowing their best ideas. You draw your curtain an inch tighter, set your shoes ready for a quick stand, and surrender to a sleep that hears. Without panicking, a practiced, humble authority any rank would envy. You learn that bedtime is also a drill. Before anyone closes their eyes, the castle rehearses its nightly defense, the way a ship reefs sails before a storm. The outer ward empties, the last cart rolls through, and the porter calls for the bridge. Chains creak, timbers rise, and the drawbridge pulls its cold tongue back into the gatehouse. The portcullis drops with the thud of a decision. Iron teeth settle into a sill worn smooth by years of exactly this moment, and the world outside becomes a rumor you plan to ignore until dawn. Doors aren't content with shut. They want to be proven. A guard slides an oak bar into sockets the size of soup bowls, shoulder against wood to feel it set, then adds a second bar, lower down because the night respects redundancy. Hinges sing their little frost squeaks, and iron studs spread impact across the planks like scales on a very polite dragon. On the warm side of the door, a curtain hangs from a beam, heavy wool, the kind that stops both draft and the casual eye. If you've ever hung a thick blanket across a hallway to tame a winter leak, this is the same stunt with better carpentry and a more dramatic vocabulary. Up in the gatehouse, someone checks the murder holes as if they were windows. Not because anyone plans to pour anything through them tonight, but because the shutters need to be sound, and the winter shouldn't treat your gateway like a flute. Every aperture is either latched, stuffed, or curtained arrow slits, shuttered with boards, window leads pushed tight against their grooves, horn panes tied with a leather thong. A good steward treats cold air like an invading army and defense like a checklist. Buckets by the hearths, lids on braziers, pegs and shutters, bars and doors, keys where they should be, and nowhere else. Speaking of keys, the night belongs to the constable and the porter. The constable keeps the keys to the inner defenses, and you can hear them when he walks small iron witnesses knocking his belt with each step. The porter owns the gate and the courtyard doors. He carries a lantern whose horn panels turn light into a private buttery globe, and a handbell he hopes not to ring. There's a watchword, a password you must say quietly to pass a post so that nobody wanders in from the dark with good intentions and bad timing. If you've ever lived in a building with a night doorman who knows every face and asks anyway, you've met this tradition's modern cousin. The watch schedule is pinned to a beam near the kitchen, a neat grid that seems merciful at supper, and less so at 2 in the morning. Men walk the wall walk in pairs when the wind allows it, one carrying a horn, the other a staff that doubles as a mind focus. On nights of hard frost, a brazier glows in the lee of a turret. They warm hands count breaths and stamp not to make noise, but to keep blood interested. If a cloud pulls over the moon, the castle turns into a shape made only of edges and habits. The men who know those edges best are the ones you trust with the keys, and they come from the same kitchen tables as the people you trust with breakfast. Inside defense and heat negotiate. A door that shuts like a vault also collects cold like a basin. You hang a woolen curtain behind it to keep the winter from walking straight to the hearth. A garderobe is convenient until the chute becomes a windpipe. You set a lid on the seat and lay a flat stone across it to block the night's idea of a joke. The newel of the spiral stair is a chimney of air. You tack up a leather screen at the foot and curse it fondly each time you duck under. Stone wants to move air. You want to keep it still long enough for your breath to warm it. If danger is a rumor tonight, you still sleep like it owes you a letter. Shoes point outward by the bed steps. A cloak hangs within reach. Your knife rests where your hand expects to find it, not for heroics, but for chores and nerves. A dog claims the bottom of the steps because dogs have opinions about footsteps that humans cannot hear. Some families rig a string with small metal discs across a corridor, one tug, one clink. It's not a trap. It's a bedtime doorbell that only rings for trouble. And then there's fire, the friend you have to frisk for matches. Curfew means exactly what the word says. In its old French bones, cover the fire. A servant rakes a small hill of embers and draws ash over it until the glow sleeps without sulking. Lids on braziers' screens before grates fresh water where you can grab it in the dark. If a spark lands in the rushes, you want the bucket before you want the shout. You're not just defending walls. You're defending sleepers from the habit of wood to remember it used to be a tree. Night multiplies consequences, so caution becomes a blanket everyone shares. Siege is rare enough to be a story and common enough to keep your habits strict. In hard times, men sleep in their boots' hauberks near at hand. Horses fed late so they'll stand quietly at dawn. Grain moves from granary to secure store. Arrows sit in covered tubs like very thin cabbages. Slings of stones stand ready on wall walks, white with rime. The same routines that keep frost out keep panic out too. Do you sleep better when you know exactly where a thing is? The castle does, and it is very much a person of habit. Drafts love corridors, so you stack screens the way modern people stack weather stripping. A hanging carpet makes a lobby before a door. A second curtain makes a lobby before the first. Tapestries pull double duty as insulation and narrative, a hunting scene trapping a sleet. You never see a saint's legend telling a quiet story while stopping a louder wind. In cold snaps, even noble rooms wear improvised cloth doors over their real doors, buttoned with wooden toggles that look like smiles and work like science. You notice how the plan of the place teaches you to sleep alert without sleeping afraid. Beds sit where a shout can be heard. A bell rope dangles near the stair for sounding the hall. In the gatehouse, the guard on the inner door keeps the keys around his neck and a bench against the leaf, so a push from outside meets both wood and a well-fed man. In the bakehouse, someone leaves tomorrow's kneading trough upside down as a dry perch for a cat on patrol. Security is 1,000 small decisions that add up to, we made it to breakfast. What would give you the best sleep here? A thicker blanket, a closer brazier, or a smarter door? Choose one, then really picture it. The weight of the cloth, the quiet breath of charcoal, the clean clunk of a bar sliding home. Warmth helps your skin. Certainty helps your mind. Both help your dreams. When the rooms finally dim to that unique castle hush, coals sighing beams, easing a distant foot on stone, you pull your curtains and understand why they call it a keep. It keeps things out, yes. But more importantly, it keeps you in your heat, your breath, your hours, your peace, all defended by wood iron, fabric, and people who know their jobs in the dark. Night trims vision, so your ears take the watch. The first thing you notice isn't a single sound, but the shape of sound, how stone edits it, rounds it, hands it back with more echo than you gave. A foot on the stair becomes 2 notes, heel and whisper. The dying hearth writes a soft alphabet of pops that makes your blanket feel heavier in a good way. If daylight collects pictures, nighttime collects textures, and tonight's are woven from breathwood wind and the small politics of animals that refuse to keep office hours. The chapel gives you the first thread. A bell for compline lingers in the rafters longer than it lingers in the air. The note seems to sit on the beams and hum to itself. Much later, another bell for the night office trembles across the court like a moth that learned music. You don't see the brothers cross the night stair, but you hear their cloth wool against wool, a faint hush of habits molded by use and prayer. Sound travels strangely in winter. Cold air carries higher pitches farther, so the smallest clink of key on ring can feel like a star hitting a pan. Outside, the wind tries on every job in the castle like a child at a trunk of costumes. It rattles the shutters to check their manners, tugs the banner above the keep to remind it who pays the weather, and turns the slit windows in the stair into flutes that choose their own tune. When the gusts stop, silence lands so suddenly you blink. Then you realize you can hear your own breath in the linen cave you built, and it feels like permission to slow down. Do you listen for your breath at night? Try it now. 1 quiet in, 1 quiet out, and notice how the room joins in. Animals write the B-side. An owl deposits the classic "to-wit, to-who" out by the orchard, an exchange that is somehow both lonely and reassuring. A dog down in the ward barks once with the tone of a professional sending a memo, all's well. But I exist. Another answers from the stable court and stops message received. Horses punctuate the dark with hooves shifting under straw, an occasional friendly blow through the nose that sounds exactly like calm. If you're near a river, water keeps its gossip even in winter. If you're on a cliff above the sea, waves file their endless reports against the rock, each one a reminder that your little bed is a dry island by design. Inside the walls, wood stretches and remembers. A beam gives a slow creak as if it has decided to understand the cold rather than fight it. A rope bed answers your turn with a single syllable of twine. Somewhere a door settles more securely into its jamb and makes a satisfied thunk that feels like a hand on your shoulder. Older castles without chimneys let the last smoke write faint lines along the rafters. When the Louvre breathes, you can hear a paper-dry sound, the scratch of air slipping through a small decision you made earlier about how wide to leave it. Water has its own clock. A drip in the conduit tower ticks with the patience of someone counting a prayer bead string. In the guardrobe shaft, a far clean draft nicks the edge of silence without being rude. The well chain answers a shift of weight with a single metallic reminder that it is ready tomorrow to be useful again. You learn which sounds mean, ignore which mean note, and which mean move. It's not anxiety, it's literacy. People in stone houses read nights the way sailors read swells. Rodents audition as ever for stardom. A skitter along the wainscot, a pause, a reconsideration where the cat has clearly left her press release. The cat's reply is the softest plop from a table edge to the floor. And then the kind of silence that means a job is happening. Herb Bunch's mint penny royals swing a finger's width in a draft, making a papery brush sound you mistake for footsteps exactly once. You promise yourself to tighten that shutter peg in the morning, not because you fear the wind, but because sound finds every gap and writes you notes through it. People make a smaller orchestra than you'd think because most people are asleep and the ones awake have learned the art of being air. A watchman's staff taps, measured and unhurried. A page in the outer chamber turns on a truckle bed, the tick of straw warm and contented. Somewhere a child whimpers into a dream and is reassured by a palm that speaks the oldest language, 3 slow pats and a shh that smooths even the blanket fibers. If you've shared a room with family in winter, you know how the nighttime pact works. We keep each other warm, and in return, we don't narrate our dreams aloud. Season edits the playlist. In a hard frost, everything hardens. Footfalls sound sharper, hinges brighter words less likely to wander. In rain, the roof sings on lead and slate and gutters lone drum into their mouths. Snow is the strangest. It swallows edges so thoroughly that the castle feels wrapped in raw wool. The first time you wake to snow, you think you've lost some of your ears. Really, you've gained a focused kind of quiet where your own small movements sound new, like you just met your blanket for the first time. If minstrels played in the hall earlier, their last notes hang around the way bread smell does after the loaves are gone. A psaltery's thin silver thread, a drum's memory in the floorboards, a human chorus folded back into talk. And then into yawns, the hall keeps sound like a pocket keeps lint. Even earlier before the curfew bell, you may have caught the day's end, noises, the scrape of trenchers stacked, the last splash in a basin. The steward's voice completing a sentence with a bar sliding into place. Those words continue walking through the stone long after the people have put them down. Night is also a teacher of distances. The same knock at the inner gate tells you where you are in the building without opening your eyes. You learn the difference between the kitchen door and the postern by how the bar answers home. You could almost map the place with your head on the pillow, brace your breath down the corridor draft, testing the stair mouth, a key, a corridor away, a cough 2 rooms over, moderated by 2 hangings and a chest. This is how you belong to a place when its noises stop being noises and become names. Some sounds come from you, and you start to enjoy that. The tiny linen hiss when you turn your shoulder. The soft thud of your heel finding the warmed brick you wrapped. The fluff sound a featherbed makes when you lift the covers an inch to let in a sip of new air. Even your stomach gets a cameo if you ended the evening with a hot posset. Warmth speaks from the inside out with a low, well-fed contentment. Simple question, which sound do you find most soothing? The hearth's last whisper, rain on roof, or a slow, familiar breathing next to you? Your answer tells you which kind of quiet you trust. When the world is mostly dark, hearing becomes a way of belonging. You don't listen to be suspicious. You listen to be placed. You let the courtyard's small symphony tell you that your watchmen are walking. Your cats are competent. Your shutters have accepted their jobs, and your fire is sleeping like a professional. The keep doesn't promise silence, it promises shape. Within that shape, you turn once more. Cap snug ankles, tucked ears content, and let the last ember of the hall be the metronome that rocks you toward the thin gray of morning. Morning doesn't arrive, it preys. It wedges a gray blade between curtain and post and slides across your closed eyes until they blink. Cold fingers pull at your ankles first. Blankets fight back with the stubbornness of loyal dogs. But the day has a warrant. Outside your cloth weather, the room is reset to stone. Your first exhale makes a little cloud that says, "Yes, we did it now. Pay the toll." You practice the castle's version of a launch checklist. Hand finds cap, cap finds ears. Feet slide to the warmed brick you wrapped in cloth last night. Its stored glow is small, but perfectly timed, like the friend who remembers coffee preferences and brings the cup without a speech. You lift the curtain an inch and let dawn's thin metal in. The rope lattice answers your turn with one obliging creak, still tight, still honorable. Nice. The floor reminds you it never married the fire. Slippers on cloak over bedgown hands into sleeves, you step out, and the chill steps in. That first mouthful of morning air tastes of wood smoke, wet wool, and a clean mineral edge from the stone. Somewhere a cock chooses confidence over accuracy and announces the hour wrong, but sincerely. From the chapel comes lauds the bell that is both alarm clock and backbone. If you've ever set 3 alarms and only respected the one that sounds like responsibility, you already know why that tone moves feet. You work the small tasks that keep a room from becoming a cautionary tale. The bed needs to breathe. Linen likes daylight. You slide the curtain back, shake the top cover once to send last night's damp outside its borders, and prop the tester valance so air can do a quiet day's work. Tick gets padded flat ropes checked for slack with the bed key's friendly torque. If straw has begun to sound tired, less crisp, more sigh, you mark a mental note to request fresh filling before the next cold turn. Do you like making beds tight or leaving them loose for easy re-entry? Hear tight winds, warmth. Tonight starts with diligence this morning. A brazier gets coaxed from sulk to civil. You lift the lid, find a few coals that remembered their job, and feed them thin splits of kindling with the patience of a parent waking a teenager. Soft voice, no sudden moves, bribe optional. When flame behaves, you pull the screen back a hand's breadth and feel the first ribbon of heat. Consider your knuckles. No heroics, just enough to keep the room from rehearsing for a crypt. Then shutters, leather thong, loosened horn, or little leaded panes cracked open to let smoke's ghost escape and the day's light decide if it likes you. Washing is a bracing story you tell your skin. The basin is tin. The water is honest, and the cloth is linen, with no interest in flattery. You splash, you gasp, your cheeks bloom, and your brain forgives you for waking it. A comb through hair releases last night's scent, a mix of hearth and wool, that nobody writes poetry about, but everyone recognizes as we live here. A dab of rosemary at the wrist off the rush basket earns you one small victory against the month's aromas. Down the stair, the castle stretches. Guards trade passwords with the private relief of men who didn't have to use them. The porter unlocks tests the bar and sets the drawbridge crew to their morning math. Chains answer with the music of iron waking up. In the kitchen, the bakehouse turns out loaves that breathe steam like beasts, and heat leaks through the wall with a generosity that deserves a saint's day. You stand in that wall warmth for a moment on purpose, catching your fingers between loaf and cloak until knuckles remember what supple means. Breakfast is less romance than fuel pottage that tastes better than it sounds. A heel of bread that tears willingly small beer or warm milk for those who'll be outside before the sun remembers its job. Someone hands you a posset left over from the night watch heat still humming faintly, and you feel your center agree with the program. Quick question, while the spoon pauses, if you could import one modern breakfast item into this room without breaking the mood. Would it be fresh fruit coffee or butter that doesn't hide chews? Your answer says which kind of morning you trust, bright, sharp, or smooth. Chores lace the day to the night that made it. Laundry moves to the yard where lines wait like staves on which clean songs will hang. Linen sheets steam from the copper. Women beat them against rails with a rhythm that makes even the dogs wag. Wool blankets don't swim, they bask. Tapestries get one fierce beating and a promise of re-hanging before the bell for terse. Herb bundles, lavender mint wormwood, get checked, retied, or replaced so their small policies keep working against the tiny troublemakers that love cozy as much as you do. Elsewhere, the hazards of warmth report for inspection. The steward makes a slow tour, braziers, lidded screens, intact, buckets where they belong. He touches the edge of the hearth to feel for mischief and sniffs rushes like a sommelier specializing exclusively in not on fire. The phrase "cover the fire" will return tonight with the same dignity it had last night. Between now and then, every hand in the place learns one more reason not to grow casual with flame. The best safety is boring. Boring saves castles. Outside frost sketches the cobbles with white geometry that will vanish by sext. Stables breathe. Horses stamp enough to announce well-being, but not enough to suggest opinions. A boy with hands too small for his broom sweeps the postern proud to be part of the morning. From the wall walk the world beyond. Looks harmless fields thinking about thaw smoke lofting from cottages that copy your tricks with smaller stones. The keep stands, which means the night did what it owed, and the people did too. You circle back to your room once more, not out of fussiness, but loyalty. The bed you tightened will greet you tonight without complaint. The brick you warmed will perform the same modest miracle. The little gap you fixed in the shutter will trade you silence for 5 minutes' work. Survival here isn't one grand gesture. It's a fan of small ones repeated until they feel like a personality. Do you prefer grand fixes or repeated quiet maintenance? Winter votes for the second every time. Before you go to the day's tasks, you give yourself one last indulgence. You stand in the rectangle of sun that found your floor and let it decide your face is its business. It's barely warm, but the light tells your brain the contract is still valid. A night will leave, day will arrive, and you are built to participate. You pull your cloak close, lift the latch, and step out into corridors that smell of bread and intention. The truth lands as softly as crumbs on a trencher. Nobody here beats the cold. You bargain with it. You learn its schedule, you keep your promises, and you borrow cleverness from fabric, firestone, and friends. If a stranger asked you how people slept without freezing, you could hand them a list, curtains, layers, embers, straw company. Or you could hand them, this morning, a room put back into readiness, a body that can still laugh when breath makes smoke, and a day that starts because a night was managed, not conquered. You tie your hood smile at the thin sun and carry your small weather forward. Before we leave this warmed pocket of blankets and breath, listen to the castle waking. Buckets clink, ovens sigh, keys jingle on a belt. You step from bed to stone and follow the sound downstairs, where dawn belongs to other hands. Who keeps the fires fed, the rushes fresh, the doors safe. Tonight's journey continues with them, the servants inside. The bell doesn't wake you, it drags you. It's not even dawn, just a bruise of gray light leaking through the cracks in the shutters. The castle is still half asleep, but you're not allowed that luxury. Before the noble family stirs, before the roosters find their confidence, you're already on your feet, rubbing warmth into your arms and praying the fire remembered how to breathe. Welcome to servant life, where the day begins long before anyone notices it has started. You move through corridors that smell like smoke wool and yesterday's stew. The stones are damp slick with the night's breath, and the only sound is your own footsteps and the scurry of something that doesn't pay rent. Your first stop, the hearth in the great hall. If you fail to get it roaring before your Lord descends, the morning begins, with disapproval so sharp it could slice bacon. You kneel, coax sparks into tinder, and whisper bargains to the fire as if it's a fussy child. When it finally catches, you feel a rush of triumph that won't make the history books, but keeps your job safe for another day. Next, water. Always water. You shoulder buckets down to the courtyard, well where your breath clouds like ghosts. The rope bites your palms, the pulley creaks, and the bucket groans its way back up. It's heavy, but so is the steward's temper if you're late filling basins for washing or cooking. You carry 2 at a time, arms trembling, trying not to spill because refilling means 5 more minutes stolen from sleep. You think just for a moment about modern plumbing, turning a tap warm water singing instantly, and you almost laugh. Almost. The castle is stirring now. In the kitchen, smoke curls from the hearth like gossip. The cook is already muttering her morning prayers or curses depending on who burned the bread last night. You slice loaves from yesterday's batch, spread fresh rushes across the floor, and scrub tables that remember every meal they've ever served. Have you ever started your day cleaning up someone else's yesterday? That's servant life distilled. From somewhere above, the sound of boots and command. The steward's voice cuts through the air, the living metronome of the household. He's the bridge between nobility and labor part, administrator part, executioner of mistakes. You'll learn to read his footsteps before you see his face. 1 heavy pace means orders. 2 quick ones mean trouble. The maids arrive next, breathless from their dormitory in the attic, hair tucked under linen caps, arms stacked with linens that smell faintly of lye. They'll start the upstairs fires soon, sweeping cinders and warming bedchambers so their masters never touch cold sheets. Down here, you and the hall boys scrub pewter until it gleams, then lay out the trenchers for breakfast. Flat rounds of coarse bread that serve as both plate and later pig food. The air thickens with smells, porridge bubbling bacon, crisping ale foaming in mugs that sweat against your palms. Servants eat first quickly, standing up silent, except for spoons hitting bowls. Then comes the main meal for the lords and ladies, a performance you'll repeat every morning, serving gracefully, bowing without wobbling, pretending your back doesn't ache. You must look invisible yet indispensable, a paradox mastered by centuries of servants before you. When the household wakes fully, the castle becomes an orchestra of purpose. You hear boots in the courtyard, the clatter of armor, the groan of gates lifting for early riders. The laundress drags tubs to the washing yard, already plotting revenge on whoever left stains too bold for soap. The young scullions run errands with the energy of people who haven't yet realized energy is finite. And above it all, the steward oversees ticking off duties with the precision of a tax collector. You fetch more wood for the kitchen. You refill buckets emptied by others. You polish dust, mop, and bow until your muscles memorize humility. Every task is timed around the Lord's day when he hunts you load the hounds. When he dines, you disappear, except for refilling his cup. When he sleeps, you guard the peace of his dreams. You live inside someone else's rhythm, but you learn to hum along until it feels like your own. By mid-morning, the hall hums with activity. The fire crackles with confidence, the nobles laugh in silk, and your reflection shivers in the polished silver jug you're carrying. It's a strange kind of pride knowing the day runs smoothly because of hands no one names. You pour ale with a steady wrist, eyes lowered, but mind alive, counting tasks ahead. Chamber pots to empty rushes, to change floors, to scrub boots, to polish errands, to run. The list is endless, but at least it's predictable. Do you know the feeling of satisfaction when everything you've done vanishes because it worked perfectly? That's the servant's reward. No applause, no thank you, just the quiet knowledge that failure would have been louder. The sun climbs, the nobles finish breakfast, and the castle exhales into motion. Horses are saddled dogs, fed letters sealed. Your part of the morning is ending, but there's no pause. Soon there'll be ash to sweep dishes, to scrub fires to bank, and another list handed down from someone with softer hands than yours. You stretch your back, wipe your hands on your apron, and glance toward the stairs leading up to the great chambers. Up there, decisions are made in velvet. Down here in soot and soap, the real work of the world happens. And you, half awake, half proud, keep the fire burning so their day can begin. You start to realize that every castle breathes hierarchy. It's invisible, but you can feel it pressing down just like the chill from the upper halls. Every person has a rank, a role, and a particular way of being ignored. The steward is the sun, stern, predictable, slightly terrifying. Everyone else orbits around him, from the buttery clerks to the kitchen scullions, each turning in a smaller and smaller circle until you reach the outer ring where you stand. He calls you by your task, not your name. Water boy, hall maid, page washer. The words stick to you like a label on a jar. Still, you learn who's who quickly, because not knowing means stepping on the wrong pair of shoes, and some of those shoes are expensive. At the top, under the noble family, is the steward master of accounts, keys, and tempers. His fingers smell of wax and ink, and his voice could slice through a feast like a dagger. He runs the castle as if it were a ship, strict order, no excuses. Beneath him comes the bailiff, who manages estates and harvests. A man who spends more time outdoors than the sky does. Then the chamberlain keeper of private chambers and wardrobes, and the marshal commander of the stables and horses. You might think that many titles would make for confusion, but in truth, they make for survival. Everyone knows exactly who can scold them, and who they can safely scold in return. The hierarchy is a ladder built from shouting, and your job is to climb carefully without missing a rung. You, for instance, answer to the undercook, who answers to the cook, who answers to the steward, who pretends to answer to the lord, but mostly terrifies everyone else instead. You find that the higher you climb, the softer the voices and the thicker the rugs. The lower you go, the louder and dirtier life becomes, but also, strangely, the warmer. The upper servants live halfway between nobility and labor, a bridge paved with exhaustion and polish. The valet or lady's maid handles clothes, jewels, perfumes, even secrets. They see things their masters don't realize anyone sees. It's the argument behind the door, the letter hidden under the pillow. But don't envy them. Knowledge's weight and gossip in a castle can get you exiled faster than a sword. Below them, the kitchen crew sweats for the whole household, cooks, scullions, spit boys, and bakers. They live by firelight and temper. You can always tell how the kitchen's morning went by the air in the hall. Smoke too thin means a peaceful day. Smoke too thick means someone cried into the soup. Then there's you and your fellow hall servants, the in-betweeners, who carry clean polish, fetch, and vanish at the exact moment conversation begins. You're the legs of the castle. If you stop moving everything above, you trips. Somewhere near the bottom, but never forgotten, are the stable hands and grooms, always smelling of hay and horse sweat. They might be filthy, but don't be fooled. The knights respect them more than they respect half the people inside. Without grooms, no charger eats, and And without chargers, no night looks heroic. In a world obsessed with glory, that's leverage disguised as mud. What about the laundress, the washerwoman, the charwoman? They wage daily war against stains, soot, and smells. The nobility pretend don't exist. It's unending, invisible work, but everyone notices the moment it stops. You can measure respect in soap. The less you need, the more you have. And then outside, but tied to the same web, are the villagers, the serfs, the millers, the woodcutters, people who live under the Lord's shadow, feeding the household that feeds him. You see them sometimes through the gate, when you haul waste or fetch grain, and you realize that inside the castle is its own tiny kingdom, complete with its own peasants' ewe. The structure is neat, efficient, and cruel in its predictability. If something breaks, the blame slides down the ladder like spilled ale until it lands in your lap. Yet oddly enough, that ladder is also what keeps chaos out. Everyone knows the rhythm: who serves at table, who sweeps which stair, who polishes which armor. If each person plays their part, the castle hums like a beehive. There's one exception to the pattern: the fool or jester. They dance between ranks, mocking everyone, untouchable in their motley disguise. You sometimes envy their freedom, the way they can speak truth while you must bow around it. But then you remember how quickly a joke can sour when a noble's pride is cold and envy fades. Hierarchy has strange perks. The cook sneaks you scraps of roasted duck if you help scrub the pans faster. The stable boy trades gossip for apples. The laundress knows everyone's secrets because laundry doesn't lie, especially silk. You become a quiet archivist of leads above your pay grade. You might not have money, but you have information, and sometimes that's a currency all its own. Have you ever worked somewhere where everyone's title mattered more than their talent? Where one wrong word could cost your position? Servants lived that truth daily. They survived by reading faces like maps, learning to sense anger before it spoke, and by mastering the oldest skill of all, invisibility. By midday, the castle is a living diagram of order, each role humming in its place, each voice fitting its rank. You walk through it like a thread through fabric, binding noble luxury to practical reality. And even though you're small in this great pattern, you know the secret every servant learns: sooner or later, nothing beautiful in this place would exist without the hands that made it so. Your room isn't really a room. It's whatever corner the castle forgot it owned. Sometimes it's a narrow loft above the kitchen, other times a space beneath the stairs where the draft hums lullabies through the cracks. Your bed creaks like it has opinions. The straw inside smells faintly of last summer, and you share it with both warmth and whatever else nature provides. Privacy, like heat, is a luxury reserved for people who can afford curtains. At night, you climb to your spot, carrying a stub of candle that weeps faster than you do. The walls breathe cold, the rushes are stale, and the ceiling feels close enough to count its splinters. You lie there listening to the castle exhale through its stone lungs, crackles, drips, and the faraway murmur of nobles still drinking by the fire. Above you, laughter. Below you, rats in the pantry auditioning for supper. You live somewhere between two worlds and belong entirely to neither. Still, you learn to carve comfort out of the noise. You hang your spare tunic from a peg to block a draft tuck straw into the gaps around the door, and fold your cloak double for a pillow. A good servant can turn anything into a bed. Have you ever slept on a night train or a couch and thought, good enough welcome to your profession's finest art? In the mornings, the air bites like an insult. You dress fast, pulling on layers that smell faintly of soap smoke and effort. Water for washing is a privilege of rank, so you settle for a splash from a wooden bucket if the ice allows. Sometimes you share that bucket with 3 others. It's humbling, but then again, humility is the unofficial uniform of service. The attic rooms belong to the younger maids girls who left villages and family hoping castle life meant steady meals and maybe a story worth telling. They giggle under their blankets at night, whispering about knights with kind eyes and stewards without tempers. You don't ruin the fantasy. You remember needing one yourself. The older servants downstairs let them dream until dawn snaps the thread. Male servants often sleep near the stables or guard rooms closer to the animals than the nobles. The smell of hay clings, but so does a kind of warmth that feels almost honest. Horses snort softly in their stalls, a steady reassurance that something in this world stays predictable. When the wind moans through the shutters, you pull the blanket tighter and imagine their body heat rising like prayer. For higher-ranking servants, the butler, the cook, the valet, a tiny chamber with an actual door is the pinnacle of comfort. The walls might leak cold, but the door locks, and that alone feels like luxury. The cook keeps a flask of spiced ale hidden under her bed. The butler a ledger he guards like a secret diary. Every rank dreams of a space where they can be off duty for 10 breaths in a row. Love, or something pretending to be it, finds even these cramped quarters. A wink across the laundry yard, a touch while passing a pitcher, a midnight whisper behind the pantry door. Romance here doesn't wear poetry. It wears exhaustion and stolen minutes. You never write it down, because letters get found, and the line between affection and dismissal is one mistake thick. Yet people try because hope is harder to extinguish than a candle in the wind. When you can't find warmth in another person, you find it in small rituals. A sprig of dried lavender tied above your bed to sweeten the air. A prayer carved into the beam above your pillow, half plea, half graffiti. A song hummed softly enough that it feels like company. Even the broom in the corner starts to look like a friend after a long enough winter. Meals for servants are eaten in corners too. Bread so coarse it could pass for a weapon broth, thin enough to see your reflection. Yet when the cook is in a good mood, or when feast leftovers trickle down, you get a scrap of roasted meat or a crust still warm from the oven, and it tastes like fortune. You eat fast before the steward appears with more orders, and thank the unseen saints for grease and salt. Do you think you could live this way? Always alert, always polite, always tired. It's not all misery, though. There's laughter in the cracks. Someone spills flour on the steward's shoes and lives to tell it. Or the scullion sings so off-key that even the rats seem to pause. These moments keep the world from freezing solid. When night returns, you crawl back into your straw and make bargains with your aching limbs. Just one more day. The candle dies, and for a moment you lie there in perfect dark, surrounded by the steady breathing of other servants who made the same promise. You can't see them, but you know they're there, your invisible family of survivors. The castle sleeps heavy above you, but down here among straw and whispers, you finally understand the quiet dignity of those who keep it alive. The kitchen is where life actually happens, loud, hot, and one wrong move away from chaos. It's also where the smell of bread could make a saint weep. By the time you stumble in, the fire's already roaring like a sermon, throwing orange light over soot-black walls. The cook commands from her wooden throne near the hearth, armed with a ladle that doubles as a weapon. She knows every crack in the oven and every servant by the sound of their footsteps. If God runs the heavens, she runs this inferno, your job. Whatever her mood requires. Some days you turn the spit, hands blistering from the iron handle. Other days you fetch flour from the cellar, heavy sacks balanced on your shoulder, while mice watch like tiny accountants. The kitchen is a kingdom built on precision, too much salt, and you risk her wrath. Too little, and you risk the Lord's. There's no applause either way, just a grunt that means acceptable. The day begins before dawn with bread. Bakers work by candlelight, kneading dough with the rhythm of prayer. Flour coats the air until everyone looks powdered like ghosts. The yeast has its own schedule, impatient, demanding divine. When the loaves emerge golden and steaming, you swear you could live on smell alone. Have you ever stood too close to fresh bread and felt briefly immortal? Then you understand why the baker gets away with a little arrogance. Then comes the porridge, the stews, the meats. Cauldrons bubble with secrets, and the air turns thick enough to chew. You dodge between servants carrying trays, pitchers, and knives, longer than your forearm. Everyone moves in a choreography learned through repetition and burns. The scullions scrub endlessly, sleeve-soaked backs bent. You stir, you chop, you fetch, because to stop is to invite attention, and attention rarely brings good things. The kitchen isn't just a place of work. It's a gossip exchange. Messages move faster here than arrows. You hear everything: which knight lost money at cards, which lady fainted after dinner, which nobleman drinks more than he prays. You don't repeat it, at least not where ears cost more than mouths. But you listen. Knowledge keeps you alive and sometimes fed. Leftovers are your unofficial wage. When the meal is served, you stand by with bowls waiting. Whatever doesn't leave the platter returns in a parade of bones and crusts. Roast fat scraped from silver feels like treasure. You chew quickly before the next order barks across the room. The line between starvation and satisfaction is as thin as the cook's patience. Drinks flow constantly, ale for everyone, wine for nobles. You carry jugs from the buttery, careful not to spill. Oil is liquid bread, safer than water, and strong enough to make even the steward forget his rank after 2 cups. Brewing happens in the same chaos. Great vats of barley and yeast smell sharp enough to sting your eyes. When a barrel ferments too long, the odor could wake the dead. Still, it keeps the household running smoother than sermons. The kitchen doubles as laboratory and hospital. Need to cure meat for winter, pack it in salt till it resembles gravel. Need to soothe the burn. The same lard that basted yesterday's goose might save your skin today. Spices arrive from faraway lands, pepper, cinnamon, saffron, worth more than your yearly pay. The Lord tastes them first. You sniff the air after he's gone, pretending that counts. Sometimes nobles wander in to inspect the kitchen's wrinkling noses at the heat and noise. You bow step aside and pray they don't touch anything. They marvel at the spits, turning whole deer, the rows of pies, the bubbling cauldrons, and then complain about the smoke. You keep your face still, because laughter would be career suicide. They leave satisfied while you mop the floor and wonder how people with silk gloves still find reasons to frown. Feast days are another species entirely. The hall transforms into theater, and the kitchen becomes backstage madness. 3 days of chopping, boiling, stuffing, icing, and praying that the swan pie doesn't collapse in front of the bishop. Servants run like sparks, fetching stirring balancing trays, so heavy you think your wrists will snap. And when the banquet begins, you stand in a shadowed corner watching music and laughter you built but don't belong to. Do you ever host a dinner party and realize the guests enjoy something you barely survived cooking? That's every day here, but once in a while the cook passes you a heel of pie or a sip of mulled wine. For a second you taste the same flavors the lords do, and it feels like rebellion disguised as dessert. At night when the fires die down, you scrape blackened pots until your hands ache. The kitchen smells of smoke, onions, and quiet victory. You hear the last echoes of laughter upstairs, the fading pluck of a lute. The cook mutters her final instructions, covers the embers, and sighs. For the first time all day, the room exhales peace. You lean against the table, close your eyes, and let the warmth soak into you, because tomorrow will start before this one truly ends, and for now, the world feels edible, if only in dreams. No one ever writes songs about cleaning. Yet without cleaning, the castle would smell like a dungeon within a week. You learn that grime is democracy's great equalizer. No rank, no silk, no crown can stay clean without someone scrubbing in silence. Your first battle each morning is against ash. The fireplaces are gluttons. They eat wood and spit soot. You crouch with a shovel, coaxing black dust into a bucket that feels heavier with every scoop. A damp cloth tied around your nose is your only defense. By the time you finish, your arms look smoked. Your hair carries the scent of burnt oak, and you start to believe soot might be a permanent skin tone. Next comes the rushes. The floors aren't bare stone, but covered in layers of reeds or straw sprinkled with herbs to mask the smell of life, sweet flag, lavender, mint if the season's generous. They absorb everything: spilled wine, dropped food, candle wax, and whatever the dogs decide to contribute. Every few weeks, you rake them out in piles that hiss with secrets. The smell is a biography of the household, rich at the top, suspicious near the edges. You beat the tapestries in the courtyard, raising clouds that would make the weather jealous. Scenes of hunts and saints flap like flags, colors dimmed by smoke and years. You notice every thread, every stitch, and for a moment you realize someone once spent months weaving what you now thwack with a stick. There's something humbling about that beauty built to be beaten clean. The great hall demands daily attention. After feasts, the tables shine with grease, trenchers harden like tiles, and the floor becomes a map of clumsy merriment. You scrape, sweep, and mop until the air smells like vinegar and herbs again. Do you know that peculiar satisfaction of restoring order after chaos? That's the servant's silent applause. Then there's the chamber pots. The noble body, as elegant as it pretends to be, has the same demands as yours. You carry the evidence discreetly to the cesspit, praying the wind stays polite. The guard robes, those stone chutes that drop waste into the moat, offer a more convenient system, though the smell is a conspiracy that refuses to stay secret. When people say castles are romantic, you wonder if they've ever stood downwind of one. Repairs are endless. Iron rusts, wood warps, hinges, squeal locks, sulk. You learn small miracles: how to patch leather with beeswax thread, how to quiet a hinge with fat, how to stop drafts with rags tucked into cracks. There's no such thing as done only done, until tomorrow breaks it again. You begin to appreciate modern tools, the screwdriver, the vacuum, the notion of weekends as dreams from another world. The laundry room is its own battlefield. Cauldrons of water hiss over fires, lye stings your hands raw, and the smell of boiled linen fights with smoke. You pound cloth against a washing board until your wrists hum. The laundress, strong as any soldier, orders you like a general. White shirts, sheets, napkins, and towels must emerge spotless, or your name lands in her book of wrath. She tells you stories while she works about lords who bled on their sleeves, ladies who cried into them, babies who soiled them, all wiped away by soap and muscle. It's history, one blister at a time. Dust never truly dies. It just migrates. You polish pewter until you can see your tired reflection, then 5 minutes later, it clouds again. Candles drip, smoke lingers, and the stone walls shed powder like old skin. Cleaning a castle is like painting the sea. You keep doing it because not doing it is worse. Outside chores change shape but not meaning. You haul hay, sweep the stables, shovel what the horses thoughtfully leave behind. In winter, you scatter straw to stop people from sliding to their dignity's death. In summer, you scrub algae from fountains so the Lord's guests don't wrinkle their noses. Nature constantly auditions to reclaim the building. You just make sure it doesn't get the part. Even clothing demands your time. Boots get polished with tallow until they gleam. Armor gets oiled so it doesn't turn red with rust. You brush mud off cloaks that touch nothing dirtier than pride. It's odd cleaning for the rich teaches you how much dirt hides behind wealth. Every sparkle is someone's exhaustion made visible. Sometimes the steward himself inspects your work, running a finger across a mantle, squinting at a cup. His silence means safety. His nod a minor miracle. You don't need praise, you need the absence of complaint. The best cleaners are ghosts. No one remembers them, but everyone feels their work. There are hazards too. Lime burns, lye bites, soot coughs liven your lungs for weeks. Yet the rhythm of cleaning carries its own calm. You scrub, rinse, sweep, repeat each stroke, erasing a little of yesterday. The monotony is a mercy. It lets your mind wander somewhere softer. You think of home, of fields, instead of floors of a sky without ceilings. Then the cook yells for water, and fantasy evaporates like steam. By the time the sun dips, your muscles hum like well-used ropes. The castle glows again, floors, gleaming air, sweet hearths, proud. Nobles will return soon to admire their reflection in cups you polished and floors you bled for. They'll call it elegance. You'll call it survival disguised as cleanliness. You hang your mop by the door, flex your sore fingers, and take one last look at the hall, the smell of herbs, the sheen of wax, the faint echo of your own effort. It's strange for a job meant to make you invisible. Cleaning leaves a mark no one can name, but everyone feels. And for now, that's enough. Clothes make the man, but servants make the clothes. Every piece of fabric in the castle, every velvet tunic, every embroidered gown, every shining surcoat passes through the hands of someone who knows exactly how hard it is to keep beauty from falling apart. You spend your mornings in the laundry court, where steam turns the air into soup and your arms ache before breakfast ends. Boiling water hisses in cauldrons big enough to baptize a family, and lie strong, stinging, and merciless fights the stains that noble life invents daily. The laundress rules this corner of chaos, a woman built from sinew and soap. Her word is law. Her stare is bleach. She shows you the rhythm: scrub, rinse, wring, hang, repeat. Shirts flap like flags of surrender across ropes strung in the courtyard. You beat the dirt out of wool against a wooden board until your palms throb, then stretch linen flat on grass to bleach under the sun. If clouds roll in, you curse like a sailor, because wet laundry is betrayal. Have you ever tried to keep up with a rainstorm while holding 40 damp tunics? That's when you discover the spiritual side of sweating. Clean clothes aren't just comfort, they're politics. A noble's spotless cloak announces wealth louder than any trumpet. The steward inspects garments before feasts, making sure not a speck of soot sullies the illusion of perfection. You learn the art of folding, of stitching torn seams with invisible pride, of keeping track of which doublet belongs to which temperamental knight. A single mix-up, a lady's veil misplaced, a lord's hose shrunk from heat, and you'll be scrubbing the guardrobes for penance. Fabrics are social ladders. Linen is the backbone, simple, useful, respectable. Wool is the workhorse, warm and forgiving. Silk, that's foreign money, spun into threads so expensive it might as well hum. You touch it once in a while, smoothing wrinkles with fingertips, trembling like someone touching royalty. It's soft in ways that make you remember your own calluses. In the sewing chamber, the needlewomen sit by narrow windows where the light behaves politely. They chatter softly, fingers moving like thoughts, mending tears, attaching buttons, trimming fur collars. You join them, sometimes threading needles until your eyes cross. The head seamstress tells stories while she works of queens who measure devotion by stitch count of merchants who sell cloth fine enough to pass through a ring. Every tale ends the same way: someone gets rich and someone else gets tired. When the lord and lady dress for ceremony, you stand by in the background, ready with pins and patience. The lady's maid fastens the laces of a gown that it takes longer to assemble than a sermon. The valet brushes the lord's doublet until it glows. You watch transformations happen, how fabric, perfume, and posture turn ordinary people into legends for an afternoon. It's theater, really, and your job is stage crew. Have you ever dressed someone who doesn't realize they're performing? You have now. Laundry is also confession. Clothes remember everything. Sweat spills, arguments, flirtations. You can tell a noble's mood by the state of their cuffs. The laundress reads stains the way monks read scripture, yemei for joy ink, for business blood, for trouble. She keeps her insights to herself. Knowing too much is an expensive habit. Not all servants deal in silks. Out in the yard, you see the grooms in heavy leather aprons, the gardeners with earth-colored hands, the smith with arms striped in soot. Their uniforms are honesty itself. Each smell tells a story: iron, hay, tallow, and effort. They may not shine like polished armor, but they wear competence like royalty wears jewels. Every week brings laundry days that spill into nights. You boil, beat, and haul until your shoulders mutiny. When winter freezes the wash water into glass, you break the ice with a hammer and pretend you don't notice the numbness crawling up your wrists. You hang clothes by the kitchen fire and rotate them like bread in an oven, praying the smoke smell counts as rustic rather than ruined. Then comes livery, the uniforms of service. The castle's colors stitched into coats and tunics, red and gold for pride, blue and white for loyalty. You put one on and instantly disappear into the role it demands. The fabric announces who you belong to. It's both armor and leash. When guests arrive, you line up like chess pieces, polished buttons catching the torchlight. You don't speak unless spoken to, but your presence says everything. This house runs like clockwork, and you are the gears. Do you remember your first uniform school job? Anything that strange mix of pride and loss? Servants feel that too. You look sharp, but you've also become a brand. Every loose thread feels like treason. Every misplaced pin is embarrassment waiting to happen. You learn to breathe carefully when nobles walk past, in case your sigh wrinkles something. At the end of a feast, you collect the wreckage: wine-stained napkins, gravy-splattered sleeves, gloves dropped under benches. The illusion of grace dissolves into laundry piles, and you're the alchemist who must turn it all back into beauty by morning. It's exhausting magic, but there's satisfaction in it too. The quiet power of making decay disappear. Late at night, when the last shirts steam dry by the hearth and the chambermaid snores beside her basket of linens, you sit on the bench and flex your aching fingers. Your nails are rimmed in soap, your skin smells of lavender and sweat, and your reflection shimmers faintly in the polished silver basin. You think of all the fine hands that will wear what you've cleaned, the soft fabrics that will never know the weight of your labor. Then you smile because every robe, every glove, every glorious garment in this castle carries a trace of you, invisible but undeniable. It starts with a cough, then another. You tell yourself it's the smoke from the hearth, or maybe the damp from the cellar stairs, but you know better. The castle's warmth is built on drafts and dust. Every winter brings a new round of fevers, bruises, and bandaged fingers. You learn early that a servant's body is part of the inventory, valuable, replaceable, and always one step from breaking. Work wounds are ordinary. burns from the spit cuts from knives that slipped mid-feast backs bent from hauling barrels. You wear your scars like signatures. The scullion boasts about his blister the way a knight brags about his sword cut. The difference is, his won't earn a ballad. It'll just ache quietly when the weather turns. But there are worse things than bruises. The kitchens breed smoke cough. The stables gift you cracked hands and a permanent perfume, of course. In summer, the dung heaps buzz with flies carrying invitations to infection. And when real sickness comes, the kind that empties whole beds overnight, you find out how thin luck can be. The castle can't keep out disease. Fleas ride in on visitors' cloaks. Merchants bring more than spices in their sacks. The first sign is always the same: someone too tired to stand, who swears they're fine. Then the fever takes hold and whispers start the sweating sickness, the flux, the pestilence. Nobody says plague until it's too late. The herbalist, half healer, half gossip, becomes the busiest person alive. She moves through corridors carrying her bundles of sage, rosemary, and rue, trailing the sharp scent of desperation. She mixes tonics in wooden bowls, muttering charms under her breath for good measure. You drink because she tells you to, even if the taste suggests she hates you personally. She'll press a sprig of lavender into your hand and whisper, "Sleep near this and pray." You do both. Sometimes her remedies work. Sometimes faith has to. Monks at nearby abbeys teach the household how to make poultices of honey and vinegar, or how to bleed the bad humors away with leeches that wriggle like guilt. You watch one cling to a man's wrist and think, who heals the healers? Still, it's not all sickness. There are injuries that come with stories. The kitchen boy who slipped on goose fat and sprained his ankle. He'll tell that tale for months, milking sympathy and extra bread. The laundress who burned her hand, rescuing the Lord's silk shirt from the fire, earned an entire afternoon of rest, a miracle equivalent to canonization. Every wound is both hazard and hierarchy. The closer you are to luxury, the better your pain is treated. The steward's ledger lists names and duties, but never the toll those duties take. You know which maids limp when the weather changes, which grooms cough blood when the wind turns, which old stablemen keep working, because rest feels like surrender. There's no retirement in a castle, only a slower pace until someone younger quietly takes your bucket. You learn to be your own apothecary. Vinegar for burns, salt for throats, onion for stings. You rub goose fat on cracked hands, chew willow bark for pain, wrap linen tight around a knee until the ache gives up. It's medicine built from stubbornness and a kitchen garden. Have you ever Googled your symptoms and pretended it helped? Imagine that, but the internet is a hedgerow. Fear lives here too. When plagues hit towns nearby, the castle gates close. Guards refuse travelers, and the chapel bell tolls more often than it should. You pray not for miracles, but for ventilation. The noble family moves to another estate, leaving you behind to guard their absence. The irony is sharp. The walls meant to protect you now trap you with everything you dread. Yet humor survives. Humans can joke in any climate. The groom swears garlic keeps death away, so he eats enough to prove it. The scullion decorates her face with soot to scare off spirits. Even the steward softens when illness touches his own kin, handing out extra ale for strength. It's not mercy, it's recognition. The cold doesn't care about class. Some sicknesses are slower and visible. The ache in your spine after years of carrying barrels, the stiffness in your knees from stairs, the calluses that never soften. You learn the art of patching not just walls and clothes, but yourself. Still walking, someone jokes, and you grin because that's the only correct answer. Real tragedy, though, comes quiet. One morning, the bed beside yours is empty and neatly folded. The laundress whispers a prayer, then goes back to scrubbing. No time for mourning. Linens won't wash themselves. You swallow grief the way you swallow weak ale because it's what's available. But later, when you pass the herb garden, you lay a small stone beside the rosemary bush. A token unspoken. In a world that forgets names, quickly, it's your way of remembering. If luck's on your side, you'll live long enough to be called old before 40. You'll gain the right to sit near the kitchen fire during winter, to share advice no one asked for, to let the younger ones carry the heavier loads. The cook will shake her head and say, "You've survived this long, you must be blessed." Maybe she's right. Maybe you're just too stubborn to leave. So you keep working, humming through the aches, eyes bright despite the smoke. A bruise fades. A cough eases. The body, miraculous and tired, adjusts again. You don't expect health. You expect endurance. In this world, that's almost the same thing. And as you walk the corridor with your bucket and broom, you catch your reflection in a dull brass plate, wrinkled hands, soot-shadowed face, a posture bent but unbroken. You smile not out of vanity, but because against all odds you are still here. If you want to understand servants, don't look at the chores. Look at the moments between them. You catch one on a holy day. The steward grudgingly grants a few hours off, and suddenly the castle breathes like a person loosening its belt. No orders, no bells, no rushes to change. Just laughter echoing off the courtyard walls, and the smell of meat roasting for someone else to enjoy, slowly for once. Feasts are rare for servants, but they do happen Christmas, Easter, a wedding, the birth of a child. You help set the tables for the lords, yes, but after the grand hall quiets, a smaller celebration starts in the servants' quarters. The kitchen offers leftover goose or venison. The brewer taps a fresh barrel, and for a brief golden hour, rank dissolves. You eat beside the laundress, the cook the stable boy, even the scribe who usually won't lower his voice for anyone under parchment. You laugh with your mouth full and don't worry about who's watching, because no one important ever does. The games follow. Dice rattle on the table, coins clink. Someone pulls out a bone flute that's older than half the people in the room. A scullion starts singing a tune so off-key that it wraps around and becomes charming. The cook claps time with a wooden spoon. There's dancing, awkward, sweaty, full of joy. For a few stolen minutes, you're not a servant. You're just alive and in motion. Have you ever laughed so hard? Your ribs hurt after a day that tried to break you. That's this moment. It's rebellion disguised as celebration. On quieter evenings, joy takes subtler shapes. A stolen cup of ale by the fire. A story whispered in the laundry yard. A walk to the chapel courtyard, where candles flicker like stars made of wax. You light one and make a small wish, maybe not for riches or love, just for tomorrow's weather to be kind. Faith for most servants is less about salvation and more about patience. Religion touches every rhythm of castle life. Bells mark the hours, matins lauds, prime terce sext, none vespers compline. You might not know Latin, but you know when to pause for prayer. The chapel offers both silence and company. Stone saints listen better than living ones. You slip in at dusk, sometimes fingers still red from scrubbing, and breathe the incense that hides centuries of other people's confessions. It's the only room where nobody orders you to move faster. Not every holy day is solemn. On feast days like May Day or St. John's Eve, rules bend until they squeak. Nobles may host tournaments, but servants have their own tournaments of mischief. You've seen maids dress as queens for an hour. Stable boys race barrels down the slope, and the old porter judge a contest of who can outdrink the cook. Nobody ever wins. It's the kind of chaos that resets the soul. There are fairs, two small worlds that spring up outside the walls. You sneak there on errands when the steward isn't counting bodies. The air smells of spice and promise. Jugglers, tinkers, charm sellers, pickpockets. It's a carnival of everything the castle isn't. You trade gossip for gingerbread, listen to a minstrel who swears he played for kings, probably untrue, and wonder what life would be like without walls. Then you remember the cold and decide walls aren't so bad. Sometimes joy comes from mischief. A broom balanced just so on a door frame to startle a grumpy clerk. A frog dropped into a bucket to make the laundry girls scream. A loaf accidentally left in the oven long enough to become the cook's problem instead of yours. Harmless tricks, small rebellions that make the hierarchy wobble for a second before snapping back into place. There's courtship, too. The castle has no privacy, but that doesn't stop anyone. A glance across the great hall while polishing cups a shared chore that takes just a little longer than necessary. You learn to flirt with your eyes because words are dangerous and time is precious. If you're caught, you'll get a scolding or worse. But sometimes it's worth it. Love in a castle is a game played with stolen minutes and borrowed courage. One evening, a traveling troupe performs for the household. The nobles watch from benches, the servants from doorways. Laughter weaving both ranks together for once. The fool juggles eggs. The minstrel sings a ballad of impossible romance, and you realize every joke about lords is safe only because it's sung in rhyme. You laugh harder than you should not, because it's funny, but because for an hour you're allowed to. Even misfortune gets its holidays. When someone leaves married off, dismissed, or dead, the servants gather with solemn cheer. They drink, remember, tell stories too loud for mourning and too tender for mockery. It's how you say goodbye in a world that forgets easily. And there are nights when laughter turns into something quieter, but deeper. The fire burns low, the ale's gone flat, and a few of you sit staring at the embers. The porter hums an old tune about his village. The scullion murmurs a prayer for her mother. You just listen, feeling the rare comfort of not having to perform. In those moments you realize joy isn't an event here. It's survival in disguise. The castle will wake early again. The nobles will feast. The steward will bark. The cook will curse, and the wheel will turn. But for now, the world is warm. The stars are kind. And you, the servant who holds it all together, are allowed to laugh in the quiet company of people who understand exactly how much that laugh costs. You start to realize that the castle has two kinds of noise, the kind that keeps it alive and the kind that could kill you if you repeat it. Every wall has ears. Every corridor has shadows. You learn to listen more than you speak, because what's whispered in passing can weigh more than a chest of gold. Servants are the veins of the castle. Information flows through you whether you want it or not. A stray comment overheard while polishing silver, a half-sealed letter glimpsed while dusting the desk, a conversation through a barely cracked door. It all adds up to a dangerous kind of education. The steward warns you early. Hear everything, repeat nothing. He's right. Rumors can hang a man faster than rope. But sometimes silence is its own power. When Lady Marjorie accidentally leaves her lord's ring behind in the corridor and you find it, you hold more than jewelry, you hold leverage. Will you return it immediately or wait to see if anyone notices? That pause between choices is what keeps the world interesting. Secrets travel faster than carts. The maids trade them while shaking out linens. The grooms share them with ale on their breath. You never know which truth will grow teeth. The cook might know who's been meeting whom behind the orchard wall. The scribe might have glimpsed a letter with a seal no servant should recognize. You can't help it. You listen, and listening becomes its own survival skill. Have you ever worked somewhere where gossip was currency? In a castle, it's hard cash with dangerous exchange rates. Once in a while, you get caught in the crossfire. A lady demands to know if her husband was in the stables past midnight. You nod vaguely because both yes and no could get you punished. A knight asks if you've seen his missing purse. You pretend not to hear. The art isn't lying, it's dodging. You become fluent in the language of ambiguity. I'm not certain, my lord. I think the steward handled that, my lady. The safest truth is the one that sounds helpful, but means nothing. Punishment is real. A servant accused of theft might lose a hand, or at least a place. A loose tongue can lose its job entirely. You've seen people vanish overnight, dismissed, replaced, erased from memory like ink washed from parchment. No one asks why. Everyone learns from the silence. Still, the castle runs on small favors. The laundress slips you extra soap if you carry her water. The gatekeeper lets you out for a breath of air if you share gossip about the kitchen. Even the steward occasionally forgets a rule when something useful reaches his ear. It's a quiet economy built on mutual understanding. We all bend or we all break. You also learn fear's many disguises. There's the fear of nobles, loud, theatrical, full of titles and temper. Then there's the quieter kind, fear of being blamed for something you didn't do. Fear of being forgotten when the household moves. Fear of becoming too old to climb stairs fast enough. Those fears sit beside you at supper like old friends. One winter, a guest dies suddenly. Whispers bloom like frost, poison plague, punishment. The steward locks the pantry, questions. Everyone counts spoons like they're suspects. For days, tension hums through the halls. You keep your head down and your mouth shut. The truth turns out to be nothing more dramatic than a bad heart, but the lesson sticks. In a castle, the difference between rumor and reality is often just who's holding the cup. The chaplain hears confessions, but the servants see them. You watch the Lord's eyes linger where they shouldn't, hear the lady's laughter tilt toward danger. You see the knight slip a coin to the bailiff slip it to the brewer, and by evening it reappears as donations in the chapel chest. You could expose it all, but what would that buy you? Except unemployment. So you file each sin away quietly, an unpaid historian of hypocrisy. Once a maid confides in you that she's been accused of stealing a brooch she never touched. The steward believes the lady, of course. You sneak the brooch back into the jewelry chest at night, not to be heroic, but because justice feels better than guilt. The next day, the accusation vanishes. The maid smiles at you in the corridor, says nothing, and that silence feels worth more than any coin. You begin to understand that morality in a castle isn't a straight line. It's a hallway with locked doors. The rich sin openly. The poor survive cleverly. You learn to navigate between the two without bumping into either. You pray quietly, but not always to the same God as the chapel's priests. Sometimes you pray to luck, or to common sense, or to the space between questions. There's a kind of power in being invisible. You witness everything: the Lord pacing at midnight, muttering about debts. The lady weeping behind her veil. The steward pocketing a coin for expenses. You know the truth of the place better than any noble chronicler ever will. And sometimes when a command comes down that makes no sense, you obey slowly, deliberately, because you know that hesitation is your only protest. The castle's stories pass through you like smoke through rafters. You can't hold them, but they stain everything you touch. Maybe one day a bard will sing about these lords and ladies, their feasts and wars. You'll smile quietly. Then, knowing the real history lived in the cracks, carried by hands like yours, spoken in whispers that no chronicle will ever record. And tonight, as you bank the fire in the great hall, you hear a murmur upstairs, a door opening, soft footsteps, laughter that ends too quickly. You stir the embers, feed them wood, and pretend you didn't hear a thing. Because in a castle like this, pretending is its own kind of loyalty. Power looks glamorous until you've seen it up close from the floor. Morning again, your last one in this particular story. The sky outside the courtyard is a pale, tired blue, the kind that promises another long day of chores and quiet endurance. You wake on your straw mattress, stretch your aching arms, and realize something's changed. You've stopped counting the days. That's how you know you've adapted. The castle hums around you, alive with routine. You can trace its heartbeat, now boots in the hall bells from the chapel hounds baying in the yard. You know which steps belong to the steward, which laugh belongs to the cook, which cough means someone's coming down with the flu again. It's strange comfort, like living inside a giant breathing machine that never stops, only changes pace. Today you've been given new orders. The Lord's family is preparing to travel for the season, and every servant must help with the packing. You haul trunks of clothes, bundles of linen, chests of silver. The procession will look magnificent when it leaves plumes, banners, polished armor. But the real work happens now in the shadows, in the sweat that keeps grandeur running. Nobility moves like a swan. You are the legs paddling beneath the surface. Still, you can't help but wonder what it might feel like to leave. The castle walls have become both cradle and cage. Outside, there's a world of merchants, minstrels, guilds, and towns that trade freedom for risk. Inside, there's safety without choice. You've known servants who left and came back, and others who vanished into rumor. Which would you choose, certainty or air ambition lives even in low ceilings? You think of the steward who began as a hall boy like you. His back is straighter, his clothes cleaner, but his eyes still count coins like they're steps on a staircase. Promotion here is possible, but never free. It costs years' loyalty and a little bit of your soul each time you bow when you don't mean it. The cook says she could have married a brewer once, but chose the kitchen because it was safer. The porter jokes he's been guarding the same door since Noah built his boat. Everyone has a version of next. Some dream of escape, others of recognition. Maybe you'll join a guild, learn a craft, open a tavern by the gate where travelers will pay you to tell stories you actually lived. Or maybe you'll marry, start a family in the village beyond the moat trade, the clatter of armor for the bleat of sheep. There's no shame in small dreams. They fit the human hand better than crowns do. Have you ever looked at your life and realized the hardest part wasn't the work, but the invisibility? Servants live in the margins of history, but without them, history collapses. You polish the same silver cup kings drink, from sew the hems, queens will parade in, sweep the halls where treaties are signed. The chroniclers will write about the nobles. You'll settle for fingerprints left on every page they turn. There's a peculiar satisfaction in that. To know you kept the fires burning the gates, standing the meals, steaming the linen clean. You're the rhythm beneath the melody, and without rhythm, no song lasts long. The castle teaches you patience and irony. You've watched knights speak of honor while cheating at dice priests, preach charity while hoarding wine lords, give orders they couldn't carry themselves for 10 minutes. You've also seen kindness where you least expected it, a lady sneaking extra bread to the laundress, a guard covering a sleeping scullion with his cloak. The world isn't divided by class. It's divided by conscience. Love finds its corners, too. Maybe you've shared glances by the well, laughter behind the kitchen door, warmth stolen from a shared cloak on a freezing night. Those moments don't last, but they're proof that even in service, you're still fully human. That's something the castle can't take from you. The day unfolds with its familiar motions, buckets lifted, meals prepared, commands obeyed. You sweep, carry, polish, and bow, but there's rhythm now instead of resentment. The straw pricks your fingers, the soap burns your hands. Yet beneath it all is a quiet pride. You may not own these walls, but they've been shaped by your labor, your breath, your time. That counts for something, even if no one says it aloud. By dusk, the Lord's party departs, hooves clattering across the drawbridge. The courtyard empties, the echo lingers. You stand there a moment, holding the broom like a staff watching the banners fade down the road. The castle feels bigger when it's quiet. And in that space you imagine all the voices of servants before you, centuries of names lost to history, still whispering in the stone. We kept it standing. You return to the great hall and bank the fire the same way you did yesterday, the same way someone else will tomorrow. You sit for a moment, hands outstretched to the warmth, eyes tracing the flicker of light across the rafters. The hall smells of wood smoke, soap, and baked bread, a combination you'll carry in your clothes forever. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them, the thousands of hands like yours, across centuries and countries, polishing, sweeping, tending, building. You are one among many, and yet entirely singular in this moment. So when you finally rise, stretch, and walk back to your little room under the eaves, you don't curse the cold. You smile into it. You've earned this day. You've endured this life. And in some quiet way, you've ruled a kingdom of your own, one made not of gold or titles, but of purpose, endurance, and the soft power of those who keep the world turning while others sleep. So now the castle grows quiet again, fire's low halls breathing softly, stars watching through narrow windows. You've done your work, heard the echoes fade, felt the warmth slowly return to your hands. Rest now. Let the stone walls guard your dreams as they did the nobles. You've earned the calm between heartbeats. Sleep, gentle servant.